You will kneel.
I will what?
On your knees.
Greetings, Deep Divers. It's Maddie again from MadeUpByMaddie.com, bringing you the next chapter in the dive. For today's transformation, our inspiration will be none other than Elizabeth Taylor in the 1963 epic drama, Cleopatra. So join me as we take another journey from January all the way to late December 1963. And without further ado, let's jump in. And now for the headlines of 1963. On February 19th, 1963, Betty Friedan's The Feminine Mystique was published. The landmark book that was credited for kicking off the second wave of feminism in America was said to describe the pervasive dissatisfaction among women in mainstream American society in the post-World War II period. The March of Washington takes place on August 28, 1963, where Martin Luther King Jr. delivers his famous "I Have a Dream" speech to an estimated 250,000 people. On September 26, 1963, President Kennedy convinces the Senate to approve the nuclear test ban treaty between the U.S., Soviet, and British forces. The treaty was said to have prohibited nuclear weapons tests or other nuclear explosions underwater, in the atmosphere, and in outer space. And closing the year on a very somber note, America's 35th president, John F. Kennedy, was assassinated on November 22, 1963, as he rode in a motorcade through Dealey Plaza in downtown Dallas, Texas. Now, I'll be sharing the 7 albums I listened to during my week in 1963. Kicking off 1963, I listened to Please Please Me by the Beatles. So looking back on it, this is what really started my newfound obsession with the Beatles. I've always had respect for the Beatles, but I never really got into them until this challenge. So I started off with the Beatles' debut album, of course, released on my dad's first birthday. This album finds the Fab Four in their poppier state, cute and lovely, but they really effectively left their footprint on pop culture for years to come. My favorites off this album are Anna, Go to Him, P.S. I Love You, Baby It's You, and of course, Twist and Shout. Monday brought the Freewheelin' Bob Dylan by Bob Dylan, a much more original composition than his 1962 debut. This album resonated with me on a much deeper level. Taking Dylan a year to finish recording this, it was well worth the wait. The political influence on this record is more personal to Dylan, and the album puts his songwriting ability on full display. It's a well-mastered contribution with almost every track shining through. My favorites off of this record: Bob Dylan's Dream, I Shall Be Free, Down the Highway, A Hard Rain's a Gonna Fall, Don't Think Twice, It's Alright. And on Tuesday, I listened to He's a Rebel by the Crystals. A bit of a slow burn. Admittedly, this record took me a little bit longer to get through. Now, don't get me wrong, the songs were incredible. The music backing the quartet is just as smooth as their sweet voices. I don't know, perhaps the theme being more centered on longing and angst put me in a mood? Who knows? The tracks chug along with a mostly slow tempo, touching on a lot of controversial issues, including domestic violence, in a song called He Hit Me, It Felt Like a Kiss. The popular title track reached the top of the charts the previous year, earning the group major recognition. My favorites off this record: Uptown and He Hit Me, and It Felt Like a Kiss. On Wednesday, I listened to In Dreams by Roy Orbison. This is my absolute favorite Roy Orbison album. It just packs perfect pop hits into one record with not a single song exceeding the 3-minute mark. So it's short, it's sweet, it's lovely. So Orbison just gets straight to the point with concise arrangements and lyricism that really evokes the dreamlike state of which the album is really suitably titled, in my opinion. Every single song left me swaying. My favorites off this one are In Dreams, Lonely Wine, Beautiful Dreamer, Shadaroba, Dream, and My Prayer. And on Thursday, I listened to Moving by Peter, Paul, and Mary. Admittedly, this is my first foray into the band's work. Now, the album is really simple. It's just vocals and guitars, that's it. But I gotta admit how charmingly their voices really work together. And they really surprised me at almost every turn. It's a nice, playful listen that is sophisticated at the same time. My favorites off this record are Puff the Magic Dragon, Man Come Into Egypt, This Land Is Your Land, and Big Boat. Alright, on Friday I listened to James Brown live at the Apollo 1962, kicking it up with some more energy. This album was released in May of '63. It was recorded the previous year. It's short and sweet. It's a live album, so it gives you the feel of his energy, of actually being there. And as we all know, James Brown has a very unique sense of musical style. And it's actually really amazing that this album is live when you think about it, because not only is it perfect and cohesive, but the crowd actually has enough sense to quiet down and really let the hardest working man in show business do his thing. My favorites off this album are Think, Lost Someone, and I Don't Mind. And on Saturday, I listened to The Patsy Cline Story by Patsy Cline. Ending this week on a sad note, yet again, I feel 1963 had a lot of sad moments, but this posthumous release came out only 3 months after Patsy Cline tragically perished in a plane crash. This collection of songs spanned Cline's career at various points, and some of the songs were already released, but it's a really nice amalgamation of her work, and it just really showcases what she was capable of in her short time in the industry. Her songs are just so perfect and left me wondering just what she could have done, what she could have accomplished for herself had she not perished so soon. My favorites off of this album are Leavin' on Your Mind, Strange, Crazy, Back in Baby's Arms, and I Fall to Pieces. Okay, so 1963 was a great year of film for me. I watched 4 films. I had time to watch 4 this year. I started off the year with Cleopatra. Again, another very, very long movie. I think this is probably the longest movie I've ever watched in my life, coming in at a 4-hour runtime. I do not know how I did it, but I watched it all the way through in one day. But I actually do know how I did it, because it was such a beautifully shot film. The actors, again, the story, the budget, the costumes, it was so grandiose that it just held my attention the whole way through. I would normally never, ever look at a movie with a runtime of 4 hours and be like, hey, I'm excited to watch this one. But this movie delivers, and I highly recommend watching this movie. While I'm sure there was a lot changed for Hollywood purposes to make the film more appealing, it still was a great movie. It had great quotes. The sets are the most memorable sets I think I've ever seen in a movie to date. I cannot believe, I want to look up how much the budget was on this film. So the budget was around $31 million for this movie, and money well spent. The next movie in 1963 was the Fellini film, 8½. I think this is the first Fellini film I've ever seen, so I came in with an open mind, and I was very, very pleased. The movie loosely is based on a director who is struggling to finish his film. He's kind of suffering from like a creative block. It's just so expertly written, and the imagery is so beautiful. The pacing is really nice. It is an Italian movie, so it is subtitled, but keeps your attention the whole way. Like I said, 1963 was a great year for film, so I kept finding gems on my journey. Okay, so remember how I said that the 1960s weren't really known for blood, guts, and gore? I was wrong, because Blood Feast came out in 1963, and it's like a technicolor smattering of blood, guts, and gore. It's so ridiculous, but it's super entertaining. It's probably the cheesiest movie I've seen. Doesn't make it horrible, but wow. It's very gratuitous. They do not skip on the blood. We're talking like bright red, fire engine red blood and guts that look like, I don't even know, like wax, chicken livers or something. It looks gnarly in the way that you know it's fake. From what I read, this movie only had a budget of less than $25,000. I mean, who cares about budget? But they still did a really good job under the circumstances of only $25,000. The story's a little zany, but it's perfect for what it is. So I enjoyed it very much. And finally, this year I did 2 scary movies. This is The Birds by Alfred Hitchcock. Came out in 1963. Hitchcock is a director. I have not seen too many of his films. Of course, I've seen Psycho. This definitely was not my favorite. This took me a long time to get through. Even though Blood Feast was super bloody, it was super gory and grotesque, I felt like The Birds was a little cheesier. The premise was just really strange for me. I just was really bored. The effects were okay, the acting was good. I just was not super engaged with this movie. It took me a long time. I think it took me the whole latter part of the evening, maybe 5 hours to get through it. I fell asleep once. I had to step away another time. It's a classic. A lot of people like it. I didn't. I'm not a movie critic. I'm just a guy who watched the movie and I didn't identify with it. So give it a chance. Give it a shot for yourself.
It's time for the big splash.
Alright, so now it's time for my big splash recommendations. What made the biggest splash for me in music this year, that was a really hard call. It was definitely between Bob Dylan's second album and Patsy Cline's posthumous release. This was so 50-50 for me, but I would have to say song for song, Patsy Cline's release just had so many hits. I know technically a lot of those songs were recorded on other albums, but it was so fantastic all the way through. And I also think there's better albums from Bob Dylan, so for me it's gonna have to be Patsy Cline, the Patsy Cline story. And for movies, hands down, 100% would have to be Cleopatra. Again, proving me wrong that a movie that long can hold my attention. Not only hold my attention, but really engage me in the story. Beautiful sets, wonderful acting, just an amazing movie. And without sounding cliche, they just don't make them like this anymore. They really don't.
Hey, it's the look!
Okay, so now we're gonna talk about the look. This was one of my favorites to do. I worked with my friend Shay. I think this did not pass the $10 look, but only barely went over, maybe $15. I believe like the wig was $8, wardrobe was about $2.50, and then there was like the little embellishments that I made in the wig with the gold pieces. So I think it came out to about $15. But regardless, I made an exact replica of what Liz Taylor's makeup looked like in Cleopatra. It's not necessarily a period makeup of 1960 fashion, nor is it really period makeup for the time that Cleopatra existed, but it's just a snapshot of makeup in a movie from that year, and I loved it. Basically, I gave Shay 2 garage doors, just a solid blue. I did use a lighter blue to smoke out the edges. I believe I went lighter blue on the lid from what I can remember, but it was just perfectly replicated. I had a really great time with the model, of course. She's a great friend. Actually, the palm tree leaf in the background was something I found on my morning jog the day of the shoot, the morning of the shoot, and it was perfect. It was just a little extra prop that I utilized for free. I mean, also, hello, can we look at these pictures? She knocked it out of the park. I actually shot this back in July or August, and I'm just now getting around to the editing process, putting the videos together, and I knew they were good, but dang, I had quite the time trying to find the best 10 or 15 pictures to include because they were all amazing. So thank you, Shay, I love you, and I'll be back at it again in 1964. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end. If you want, you can always check out my website, madeupbymaddie.com, where you can see my blog, view my portfolio, My site is available in English and in Spanish, and of course you can contact me or book me, as I am a worldwide makeup artist and I would love to be a part of your world. Thank you so much, and I'll see you again next time.